Namaste and hello. Welcome to the BAPS Better Living Podcast. This series is called the Dharmic Life. It's a chance for us to take everyday moments and find a deeper spiritual dimension to them so that we can find greater happiness, greater joy, and greater peace in our day-to-day life. My name is Dhawal and I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by my co-host Kashyap. Kashyap, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Dhawal?
I actually want to start off by pausing for just a moment and asking you, do you actually mean it when you say, how are you actually doing? Is this something that most of us actually mean when we say, how are you actually doing today? And you were telling me a really interesting and fun story before we started the call. Talk to us about that.
So every Monday morning, we have a kind of a weekly call at 7 a.m. It's a leadership call. Each section department head gets on a call together, about 5 of us, and we just do a quick rundown of what's going on, issues, concerns, questions, just to level set for the week. And it starts at 7 a.m. I usually get on at about 7:05 because, quite honestly, I find the banal, how was your weekend? How are things going? Conversation that usually starts the call boring and kind of empty and vacuous. So I really don't necessarily enjoy that kind of small talk. So I usually get on at 7:05, and I'm sure my partners are listening right now. And hey, guys, I'm sorry, but it's the truth.
But I think what you're saying is true for most of us, right? We take the small moment, the small interaction. Hey, how are you doing? And we find a way to kind of trivialize it. It's almost like a rite of passage that you just say, just so you can get to the actual heart of the matter. Let's talk about work. Let's talk about something different from you. And I think this is cultural as well. This is certainly the case in North America, where we just say, hey, how are you doing? And then talk about the real thing. But you look across cultures, you go to India, and in Hindi, you say something like kaise ho? And then in response, you just say theek hu. Or in Gujarati, you say something like kem cho. We just skim over this type of topic. And I think this is such a great place to start our very first episode on, let's find a way to elevate this thing called small talk, because there's so much deeper that happens within it. Before we started our call, we were talking about an incident that happened to me where a friend of mine, actually a coworker that I'd known for a long time, and we parted ways. We were working in different companies at a certain point, and we were just catching up. And he called me and I said the usual, hey, how are you doing? And he paused and he said that, actually, I'm quite depressed lately. This is completely off script. We were going to be talking about the venture that he was working at, the new startup that he had started up, and all the exciting things he was doing there. But what he was telling me in that moment was, I'm depressed and I'm not feeling all that great. And in that moment, a part of me is like, well, this is really awkward. I don't know how to tackle this. But then a part of me said, you know what, let me stop here and pause and listen and just try and understand what's going on with him. And we spent the next 20 minutes just talking about what he's going through, the pressures and challenges of running a startup. And at the end of it, I think our relationship grew in those 20 minutes more than it had grown in the last 5 or 7 years. And I think that's sort of the power of these small moments, these small, what we consider small talk. I don't know what's coming up for you as you hear my experience, as you're reflecting on your own experience. Anything coming up for you?
No, it's actually a really, really interesting story. And, after we were talking about how I kind of blow off my, first 5 minutes of small talk for my meeting, I was thinking about small talk in general and just those connections. And I think for you, that moment was real because your colleague, because your friend, there's a certain level of trust. And when you kind of go down that rabbit hole of trust, you can actually understand how those small interactions, that small talk, it's really not filler. It's not fake. It's foundational if you make the most of it. We think it doesn't matter, but it really does matter. These small interactions that we have throughout the day, whether it's with the barista or the cashier, they're foundational because they're like these small emotional handshakes. And when you acknowledge somebody, when somebody asks me how I'm doing or how my weekend was, and I respond, good, and how was your weekend? They can tell if I really care, if I'm looking at them in the eye, or whether my back is turned on my way to the coffee machine. And fundamentally, if you think of it from a happiness perspective, from a social science perspective, those people that routinely interact, small interactions, these aren't like deep philosophical conversations that go on for 2 or 3 hours, but those small interactions with the cashier, with the barista, with your Uber driver. Those people are fundamentally happier. They're more fulfilled. There is this, epidemic of loneliness, and there are many reasons for it. Social media, perhaps, digital life, work from home, and people are feeling it. And I don't think we take advantage of these small things. I know I don't. And when you actually take a step back and think about it, you realize the value of these small things and how pausing for a moment, thinking about it, builds this deep trust, much in the same way your colleague showed a certain trust in you, knowing that you would actually want to hear him out, care about what he has to say, and provide some guidance and input. Even if it's something as simple as, I'm so sorry you're going through that. A little bit of empathy, a little bit of kindness that's genuine goes a long
And
way.
I think that's sort of the key word, right? People can tell when we're being fake, and just showing or making an act of empathy and genuinely coming from a place there that, let me pause here and actually see you. And what you talked about, this loneliness epidemic, people aren't used to being seen anymore. People we are displaying our personalities out on social media. We're putting out a story of who we actually are. The real us, that real us gets amplified only in those small moments, those real small things. That's where our true personality can really shine. And I think what you talk about, talking with a barista, talking with someone getting on a bus, talking about presence. When someone pauses and just really listens to you, that's when you feel good to open up and trust that person. As you're sharing that, I'm reflecting back on what it's like for me to be on the receiving end of someone's presence, someone's pure undivided attention. I remember when I was in college, I was going through a really tough time. And every once in a while, not too often, I would get a phone call from Pujya Snemuni Swami. Snemuni Swami call me just maybe once every 3 or 4 months, just checking up on me, saying, hey, how are you doing? At that time, I was going through a very competitive program. I was at a college that was filled with a lot of sort of rich kids who had gone to private schools and had a very distinguished, or rather privileged upbringing. And I was from a public school. I had the same 3 or 4 shirts I would wear again and again. I didn't have designer clothes or anything like that. And the coursework was actually extremely challenging, but I felt really out of place within this context. I was the only person of my skin color, one of the very few people of my skin color in this classroom. And I felt really, really, really out of place. The cultural norms were different. Everything was different. And it was really competitive as a program. And I can sincerely tell you that the 5 or 10 minute call that Snemuni Swami had with me every couple of months or every couple of weeks changed my life. It helped me feel grounded. It helped me feel that I wasn't going insane. And it was such a small moment, but for that kid or someone 10, 15 years ago, that level really appreciated that small moment of presence. And I know you've also been on the receiving end of that incredible amount of presence. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Well, first of all, shout out to public schools all the way through, a big fan, big supporter of public schools, public universities. And the second thing is your experience, unfortunately, is of being the other, right? And many of us have experienced this idea of being another, and it's hard. It's hard, and you feel alone, you feel kind of unanchored, unmoored, and you're just kind of floating around out there. Somebody with station, somebody you respect, paying attention to you makes a really, really big difference. And that's where I draw this line from this idea of small talk to real leadership, to spiritual leadership. And the idea that it's about presence. It's not about titles. It's not about authority. It's about paying attention. It's about being present for the little things, for the little people, for those small moments. And that's really where a certain level of greatness is found and really born. In 2017, Mahant Swami Maharaj, who is the current guru, the spiritual leader of BAPS Swaminarayan Sanstha, was in Atlanta. He was walking backstage. I was standing there. And he looked over at me and he just made a comment in Gujarati in passing. He just said, Shivla Jivo Morducha, which translates to, he has the face of Shivendra Bhai. He looks like Shivla. And I understood what he meant immediately, but nobody else could quite grasp what the comment was about. Later that day, one of his attendant swamis asked me, what did Mahant Swami say to you? What did he mean by that? And I just said, well, I have 8 mamas, 8 maternal uncles. And one of the older ones, his name is Shivendra Bhai. and he's in his 80s. He's frail in health. But Mansami made that comment that I favored him in terms of my resemblance. I looked like my Shivendra Mama. And it was a small comment, a small moment, just a passing, thing, just kind of words in the ether that nobody else necessarily even paid attention to. But for me, it immediately told me a couple of things about him, that he saw me. Who was I, right? Just a little person. Yet he saw me. He just didn't see me. He recognized me. He identified me back to my family, and he knew who my uncles were, and he knew what my uncles looked like, and he knew that I looked like one of them, right? So in that moment, my relationship with him significantly deepened. It didn't take much from him, but it just shows a power of reflection, of memory, and just authentic connection. He earns my respect, not just because of the seat that he's in, right? He's the guru, he's the spiritual leader. But more deeply, he earns my respect because of how he cares about me. And I'm sure there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people throughout the world that probably could share a similar experience.
What's remarkable about that story is that you would think that remembering that detail might have happened because, he had a few moments with you. But you got to remember, in Atlanta, 2017, there were thousands of people meeting him throughout each and every single day, literally thousands of people meeting him. And in all of that, in that chaos of meeting so many people, he saw you. He stopped time and he saw you for who you were and made that connection. And I think about, how often do leaders actually do that? How often do we do that even as family members? Do we remember a family member's significant event, a significant birthday, or a significant anniversary? I know I have a hard time remembering my anniversary. We haven't been married that long, but sometimes I'm like, wait, hold on. Is it this day or this day? Am I off by a day or not? But those small moments actually matter.
That's going to get you into trouble. If not now, eventually it will. I just want to echo that sentiment. My daughter has told me so many times about her friends at school. And every time she mentions a friend's name, I act completely clueless, because it's true. I don't remember any of her friends' names. I don't remember any of these people at all, even though she's told me about a couple of dozen times who they are and what they do and why she's close to them. But it just kind of, tells me, hey, I have 2 kids. I could probably pay more attention to them as well.
And this is a universal experience. I think we tune out. And I think you're bringing up a really interesting point about the importance of small moments in cross-cultural communication and cross-generational communication at the workplace, at home. There are different generations living. People of different cultures. And we think what matters are the size of our home. What matters is the car that we're driving, the luxuries and amenities that we're bringing. But the real form of happiness comes from, do I see the other person? Am I really connecting with them? Do they feel that this person that was talking with me, who's my parent, who's my boss, my manager, my colleague, my coworker, whatever that is, are they here for me? Do they have my back? Because that's what creates psychological safety. We know that from a lot of literature that psychological safety is one of the number one determinants of team success, of group performance, and of group happiness, right? If we want a happier family, we want a happier place at work, we're going to need to create psychological safety. And the way to do that is to stop time and be fully present with the people that we're with, even in those small moments, especially in those small moments.
There's a quote, I'm not going to try to say it in Sanskrit, but it essentially means, he who sees the divine essence in everyone, in all of us, truly sees. And it's a nice saying, it's a nice aphorism, but when you actually take a step back and think about it, you realize that what we're talking about today, social scientists, the research today, it echoes back to thousands of years of scriptural teachings, right? And you and I were talking about an incident of Mansami Maharaj's predecessor, Pramukh Sai Maharaj, when he met the former president. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, I'm happy to get into that incident because it, I think, really shows that the sense of presence and what it can do for someone. Back in 2001, a giant earthquake had happened in India, which displaced tens of thousands of lives. And a couple of months afterwards, the former president of America, Bill Clinton, decided to come visit India. And out of all the places that he could have visited and all the people he could have met, he chose to meet Pramukh Swami Maharaj in Gandhinagar at the BAPS Akshardham. because he'd had an interaction with Brong Sai Maharaj before. It was a very small, short incident, but it left enough of an impression on Bill Clinton that he decided to come meet Brong Sai Maharaj again. So Bill Clinton, along with his aides and a lot of other government officials from India and America, come to BAPS Akshardham in Gandhinagar. And it was meant to be a very short meeting, but it ended up going on much longer because Bill Clinton was so immersed in the experience of Brong Sai Maharaj and the presence that Brong Sai Maharaj was extending to him. Time stopped still for him. At the end of that entire incident, Bill Clinton, his entire retinue decided to pack up. They were all going away. And all the other Swamis around Brong Sai Maharaj were absolutely elated. They were so excited the former president of America had come visited them in this, relatively small city of Gandhinagar at BAPS Akshardham. Everyone was walking on cloud nine. And in that, excitement and elation, they turned around trying to find Brong Sai Maharaj, and they sort of saw him wandering off to meet these two other, what we would consider, quote unquote, small people. Well, it turns out that these two, quote unquote, small people were from that earthquake affected area. They were two brothers. And Brong Sai Maharaj, without any hint of self-importance, became fully present with those two people. He started talking with them, started inquiring about how did they get here? What are their accommodations like? Did they have food? What's happening back on the earthquake affected site? And he had this interaction with the same level of ease, with the same level of presence as he did with Bill Clinton. And at the end of it, he made sure that these two people had a comfortable journey back home, that they were taken care of while they were here, and that they felt a sense of peace and they got their issues resolved by meeting Brong Sai. Now, from a macro perspective, this incident seems quite small. But from a practical perspective, this is a really interesting insight into Brong Sai Maharaj's life and the presence he brings people. There was no sense of self-importance that he had just met Bill Clinton. He saw Bill Clinton with the same lens that he saw these two brothers. He saw them through the lens of divinity. And he was able to be present because he thought of these people as being equally divine as anyone else out there. So it's a very powerful moment, but it, I think, tells us that it's really incredible what happens when a leader stops, pauses, and takes a moment to really see you and not think about big people and little people, because everyone is important.
Everyone is important, big people, little people, and all conversation is important. The big conversations and the small ones as well. Brong Sai Maharaj, when he spoke at the United Nations so many years ago, he quoted a Sanskrit slok, which I can say, Ishabhasyam idam sarvam, which means see God in all, see the divine in all. And that tells me that quote means a lot to me for two reasons. Number one, because of what it means, but also because it's not just about what you do when the spotlight's on you. He was speaking at the United Nations. He had an unbelievably large platform and the world was looking at him when he said it. So clearly, we say the right things when everyone is paying attention. When big people are paying attention to us, we say the right things because we know it will be scrutinized and it will reflect on our character, on our values. But it's about what you do when no one's watching, right? So Brong Sai Maharaj said that at the United Nations, but then he lived it with that incident with those two brothers from Bhuj at Gandhinagar, right? It's not just a slogan. It's about how he lived his life. And it really does inspire me to be better, to instill that culture into my day-to-day interactions with my friends, my family, my coworkers.
I think what you're bringing up is really interesting. This idea of how leadership is actually shaped in the small moments. They're just saying in management literature that culture eats strategy for breakfast. We think what matters is, as we were talking about earlier on, the KPIs, the OKRs, the goals and objectives and corporate mission statements and all those sorts of things. But what all the research seems to suggest is that if the culture isn't there, then it doesn't matter how brilliant all these other strategies and tactics actually are. If the culture is toxic, if the culture diminishes people, if the culture differentiates between big people and little people, then you're not going to be able to execute your strategy. We're not going to be able to have the kinds of harmonious relationships you want at home because culture eats everything else for breakfast. And in the same way, I think Brong Sai Maharaj really understood, and Mohan Sai Maharaj really understands that what matters most is me being present and showing up. Because in just the act of showing up, I'm taking what's considered quote unquote small moment and treating it with the weight that it deserves. Because there is no small moment, there is no big moment, there's only presence. And can you show up with enough presence? Because it's those moments of presence that end up determining the culture for your life, really. It's a powerful lesson, I think, for all of us.
I think that's a wonderful, take home message, for this conversation, culture, eat strategy all day long. The second lesson I think would be authenticity trumps authority every single time. The real leaders, the ones that really inspire the people around them, they're authentic, they're genuine, they earn their trust because they're present. So, for me, the take home message in terms of practical take home messages is that I need to pause. I need to reflect. I need to take a breath when somebody asks me a very basic question like, how was your weekend or how was your day? I need to answer honestly. And then I need to return the favor and give them a moment to respond as well. I need to remember things better. Your kid plays baseball. I know you guys had a game this weekend or a tournament this weekend. How did he go? How did he play? You mentioned your mother was ill. Is she still in the hospital? How's she doing? I pray she's recovering well. These small, genuine interactions, I think, will build deeper relationships with the people around me. And I believe it will lead to more trust that they'll have in me, but also a deeper sense of connection that I'll have with them, which fundamentally will improve both of our lives.
I know a takeaway for me is that this conversation helped me be grateful for the small moments where I've been on the receiving end of receiving this type of presence. And it feels really good. And I think I want to reflect a lot more on all the people who have given me the gift of their presence. And I think it reminds me to show up with presence myself when I speak with all the people that I speak during the week, the meetings that I have, the coworkers that I speak with, especially in a virtual world. All of my work happens remotely. It happens on my computer, and I'm talking to people on a weekly basis. But how often am I showing up, and am I being fully present with them? Or do I have other tabs open, and am I just scrolling and replying to emails and all those sorts of things when I'm supposed to have a real interesting and deep conversation with a colleague or coworker or a friend or mentor? And this is a good reminder that I need to pause. I need to see the divinity in them. And that's what's going to give me the permission to see them at their best, their highest, and give them that presence. So I think this is an important lesson. It's going to elevate our lives, and I can't wait to see what we learn from our few weeks of experience and actually trying it out over the next couple of weeks.
Well, I'm definitely going to try it out this coming Monday morning. I'm going to get on call a little bit early, and maybe I'll pay attention.
I think that sounds like a plan. And I think this is a great place for us to finish our first episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope this episode is inspiring you to find a little bit more spirituality in your day-to-day life. Until next time, namaste.